Hello and welcome back, everyone, post-lunch at Leap 2026. I'm joined here by two amazing guests. We'll do a round of introductions. Perhaps I'll come to you, Lalita. Tell us who you are, what you do, and maybe in one sentence, tell us what resilient infrastructure means to you.
Hey, thank you for the context and the introduction, Buddha, and thank you to the Type team for having me here today. I'm Lalita Kagitapu. I lead platform engineering initiatives focused on scalable infrastructure and modernization, providing a safe and a sustainable foundation for innovation in First American. For us, resiliency is foundational. It is not an afterthought. It is part of our design process. As we design systems, we want customers to feel trusted and deliver this trusted financial services consistently in failure or in attack or in scale. So over last few years or last 2 years, if I have to say, resiliency is something we have our application teams inherit versus they configuring it. So they focus on business logic and we provide the resiliency.
Great. All right. Thanks for that. Caleb, tell us a little bit about yourself and what does resilient infrastructure mean to you?
Yeah, thank you, Buddha. And I will echo. Thank you for having me here today. This is a really neat opportunity. My name is Caleb Cole. I currently work for Wings Credit Union, formerly Ent Credit Union. We've been merging two companies. So I've been in the information security space for a little over 8 years now. In my roles, I've moved from information security manager to a management role in technology, risk management, including business continuity and disaster recovery functions. Currently, I'm the enhanced technology program manager for Wings, which more or less means that I get the responsibility to build and implement a governance and security program around all things AI, machine learning, automations, agentic, whatever the organization is going to use. I would say that for me and in the roles that I've been in, resilient infrastructure really means having the people, processes, and technologies, as well as the governance in place to absorb disruptions, to maintain critical member services, and to recover quickly. I feel like over the last couple of years, that the definition has expanded a little bit to also include cloud concentration, as well as third-party dependencies, identity, as well as the AI-related risks.
Perfect. I will come to you shortly because I've got a few follow-up questions there. But before that, Lalita, you mentioned something about, some elements about resilience being foundational to what you're doing. So it's not an afterthought. So tell us a little bit about when you're designing these resilient infrastructure, like what are some of the key components of that? What kind of tools are you using? What kind of patterns are you using? What are the practices that make the biggest difference here when you are designing such a resilient system as a foundation?
Yeah, so there are a few things I would love to share. One is ensuring that we have network resiliency. So of course, our cloud providers provide that resiliency at control plane, but as a platform, we are responsible to provide that resiliency at data plane and also for applications so they can inherit all this goodness. So what we have done is all of our configuration is offered as templates. So application teams whichever is starting greenfield, inherit all of this from day one. And we use Tyke as our API gateway at the edge. So there we have Tyke set up for HA and topology spread constraints and PDBs that allows us to have scale as we need and multi-region. Having high availability across all the layers of our systems is key for us. So we also have a default and opinionated configurations for circuit breaking, rate limiting, and tryouts, which again we use Tyke and also service mesh. We have dual circuit breaking there that allows us to kind of contain the blast radius or limit the faulty APIs ahead. and not let the last effect trickle down into entire platform. So these are few things. And also the most important thing, we are like doing this on crawl, walk, run phase, if I have to say that, is we are trying to standardize authentication. I think having, of course, we all have inherent legacy systems, and we're just making sure that we have standardized authentication and predictable and uniform patterns for all of this. Um, Again, we are trying to do all of this as a form of IAC, which is our preferred way of doing it. So if it's not code or config, it doesn't exist. The one other thing we brought on board as we are looking at resiliency is all our deployments and rollbacks are backed by GitOps and are completely automated. If it is not a GitOps commit, it doesn't exist. So knowing that last good configuration is not a guesswork anymore. So these are few things. We are we have a lot of this in place, and some of them is work in progress, but we feel very comfortable with what we have built. And also just making sure, as we have this all of this in form of GitOps, we are just making our systems future ready. Basically, we are making, whether it's AI agents, orchestration, or just doing prompt engineering, whatever that is, your systems are true to your source code.
Perfect. I mean, you've got the right foundations pretty much from ground up here. Probably one of the more, the sign of pretty much having a very mature platform, as we say in our world, that's an API platform, is to have this level of scalability with things that are already operationalized, and pretty much at a stage where now you're looking at optimizing things and making sure things are working almost seamlessly together. So that's great. That's a testament to the work that you've done. I'm curious, coming to you, Caleb, here. Does sort of that obviously resonate with you? Like the way you are designing systems, are they similar to what you're seeing or heard from Lalitha? And if so, taking the next step forward, what would be sort of a sign of a successful or a resilient infrastructure? Like what kind of KPIs, if you had to put numbers associated with it, what would that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do think in a lot of ways, and I am somewhat separated from the IT infrastructure and engineering side of the house. I'm more in a risk type of role. So governance is more kind of where I'm at. However, from the metrics standpoint, it is something that is definitely within, what I'm focused on trying to help the organization manage. So, one of the key things, we're a credit union, so our members are our primary focus, and they have the most importance. So member access to core digital services is, one of the first and foremost things that we have to be aware of, so that CIA triad idea of availability is very big. So it's the availability of our online banking, as well as other member-facing platforms that are in use. I want to think of uptime of frontline systems that our staff are using to support members. So that might be the core banking system, or even our CRMs and some of the other support tools. I would be looking at recovery time for in-house critical systems. Especially for the criticals, we really try to make sure that we have plans and procedures and strategies in place to be able to recover within 2 hours of an incident occurring. I also would be looking at vendor SLAs, so performance for third-party supported critical systems. And then, to make sure that we have all that in place, we try to make sure that we have tabletop exercises that are in place and active at least on an annual basis, if not more, so teams can execute recovery procedures under pressure. And that's both the business teams testing out their manual procedures, as well as our IT partners who might be restoring backups or bringing systems down, or even rolling them over to our backup sites. So really, I look at it through that lens of availability, recovery performance, vendor reliability, and really just whether the business can execute during a disruption.
Got it. That's a good list, and I'll come back to, if you had to start over, what would that look like? So we'll come back to that shortly. Back to you here, Lalitha, in terms of when things go wrong, so obviously you've got a fairly automated process. You've got your config as code, you've got infrastructure as code, like a lot of that makes sure that things are very well automated. Now, what are some of the common failures that you've seen when it comes to designing systems like this? Like, where do either people go wrong, or even with all of these guardrails, are there failure points that you still have to take into consideration?
100%. Failure is something we have to accept and design for, right? So, keeping that motto in as part of our design aspects, um, observability is one thing I would like to call out. You are as good as how much you can see your system and trace your system. Without observability, we are totally blind. So, we have been working relentlessly to offer observability as something, again, application teams inherit. So what happens in our platform is like we have eyes all the way through our network stack in a very consistent and a predictable way. There are not, we observe and instrument observability across the stack, starting from your network and starting your hotel instrumentation and application. So all of this is all pre-baked into a platform, pre-baked into templates which our applications start as greenfield or something which they inherit when they start to migrate onto this platform. So, which helps them to have observability from day one. It's not like, oh, we have to now add additional logging. No, you have all you have to do to kickstart your hotel instrumentation is just make sure you do the logging and you have the right key in place to do it. So that's one thing, which is something we have observed as a huge gap and have been trying to address. We have great partners within First American who help us in this journey, making everything observable. Second thing is working with legacy system and doing greenfield. I called this out already, having inconsistent authentication patterns or not having ICE into or not having the right access logging in at your applications when they enter our network. So again, we are using API Edge Gateway to make sure we have all of this access logging built, which is already available. We turned it on. In fact, it was just a small configuration. So what I'm trying to say is we pre-bake this again to all of this application, all of this so that application teams inherit. Second thing is uncontrolled dependency chains, API, calling APIs and APIs. Sometimes these are third-party integrations. So when we have these integrations, there is latency amplification across services. So again, this is where circuit breaking patterns and observability becomes key part of our making sure we are resilient and have eyes into our system. So again, circuit breaking is something which we take very seriously, not to affect the entire platform, but limit the blast radius again. Again, I'm just thinking like, of course, rate limiting and auto retries is something we encourage our application teams, something they have to focus on, which is very, very important aspect of designing APIs. So basically, we are trying to build API governance that can be inherited as much as we are in the process. And we hope to run from crawling, walking very soon.
Got it.
Again, there is, I called this out already, recovery confusion. So that is something we have solved for, and we are very comfortable saying application teams are pretty confident in moving their, making those changes and getting it to production very confidently because they now can roll back with as much confidence in case of a incident or an issue. Yeah, these are the few things I think we have been trying to improve and our observations along the way for us.
Oh, great. Absolutely. I think this is where I think things like observability plays such a huge role, because you almost think like it could be an afterthought. Oh, I think we'll set that up later on or something like that. But if you don't know what's going on in your system, or if you don't know where to look in most cases, then either you don't know there is something wrong before it's too late, or B, when something does go wrong, you're not sure where to look. And therefore the recovery times and the KPIs that Caleb was mentioning just doesn't come to fruition because you're stuck with a system that doesn't help you out, because with observability you have eyes, you're not flying blind anymore. So I feel like the observability element is very, very critical there.
Yeah. So we have this uniform way of doing this. We have logging across our containers, networks, right? So it is pretty consistent. And with all these distributed systems, application teams doesn't have to worry about, oh, where are my container logs? Where do my for each API, it is not different. You have certain parameters you have to filter for, and that's it. You're set. You have one single place to go and look for all your logging. This also really helps with a lot of our audit logging, because all the control plane and data plane logging is now in place, and it's just one single platform, and which makes like instead of going and reviewing it manually, now it's all automated. Pull the reports, you have it there.
Great, awesome. That's really good insight into what could potentially go wrong and obviously what some of the components are. So question here for Caleb, you mentioned some of the KPIs associated with it. Let's say you are now designing this resilient infrastructure that we have sort of described so far. You've got certain KPIs in mind. You're going to be supporting like 110 plus business processes. You're going to need to achieve like maybe 2, maybe 3 nines of resilience in this case. We'll keep it simple. Sure. And then the less than 2 hours of critical system recovery time, as you stated earlier on. How do you go about doing it? Because obviously this is a sign of a fairly mature platform, or mature infrastructure already. Let's say today someone is designing it. How do you go about that process? What frameworks would you use here?
No, that's a great question. There's so many different frameworks. It's kind of sometimes hard to just pick one. Sometimes you just draw from the best. As a financial institution, we tend to leverage a lot of content from the FFIEC or the NCUA, who heavily rely on NIST and a couple of other strong frameworks. But I think it boils down to just doing the right things at the right times and working with the right people. I would say I want to get a lay of the land. I would want to start working with the business lines and IT together, as well as the risk and information security teams, but to get a holistic understanding of the business functions. What is really important for the business to actually continue on. So that's going to be inventorying your business processes and then performing business impact analyses on those 110 or more business processes. So you really identify what is actually critical. And then you begin mapping those critical processes to the infrastructure, to the applications that they're going to use, to the identities involved, the data. Where are your data stores? Where are your data lakes? Is this cloud? Is this on-prem? Where is all of this stuff going? Are there third parties that are consuming that data or processing that data for us? And understanding where all those pathways are. And I also think there's a lot to be said for separating your vendor managed from your internally managed services. You have to control those different. And largely speaking, you're transferring a lot of the risk of that control over to a vendor. So in that aspect, you have strong contracts, data protection agreements, and things like that. So you can actually track and manage those things. I'm a firm believer in testing, at least annually, sometimes depending on criticality. You may need to test more frequently to ensure that you're really accounting for things. And when testing, you need to be honest. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen in most of my experience in any type of control testing or plan testing or what have you is really the need to be genuine and honest about what are the threats, what are the potential risks, what are your actual capabilities, so that you can really provide sound guidance to the rest of the business.
Fantastic. We are almost at time now, unfortunately. I think I'm going to just open it up. If there is any question from the audience for us to ask, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, I'm hoping you guys can probably hang around a little bit in the backstage while we head on to the next segment. Lalita, just parting thoughts. If you had to give one advice to our audience today who are designing their own resilient infrastructure, what would that one advice be?
One advice would be, if it is not code or config, it doesn't exist. GitOps is the way to go.
Fair enough. One advice, Caleb, from your end?
So when we're dealing with financial services, the resilient infrastructure, it's ultimately about preserving trust. If our members can't trust access to services, or if we adopt innovation faster than we can govern it, the issue is not technical failure. It's going to become a business failure.
Fantastic. Wise words from wise folks. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all your inputs and insights. That's a great framework for people to follow. Hope you had a great time here as well. We are going to be moving on to the next section. Thank you so much, Lalita. Thank you so much, Caleb. Great session.
Thank you. This is great.